What's going on, guys? It's Pseychie. So, your boy's done with finals, and the topic of this video has been requested for a while. After playing a number of roguelikes, I will be rating on some of the soundtracks of them that I played over the years. And first and foremost, and I know this is going to get brought up again and again, this video factors in the ratings from the game's soundtrack only. It completely ignores elements of gameplay, lore, progression, difficulty, and graphics. I don't want to hear any, "Oh, you rated the OST poorly, that means you must hate the game." No, absolutely not. That being said, this list is highly subjective, just like your taste in music. I have nothing against the composers for these soundtracks. This list is purely based on a personal basis. So I'll give a few points to justify my ratings. How I judge them is based on how much enjoyment the soundtrack adds onto the game. Since games are not movies, you are not guaranteed to hear every single track in every single run of a roguelike that you do. So that means tracks that are rarely played or have ridiculous conditions to be able to hear them will likely not be factored into my rating. If you have to 360 no-scope an enemy, beat the game on the hardest difficulty, and become the Elden Lord just to hear one track, yeah, I'm not factoring that into my rating. An example of this might be the Planetarium track from Binding of Isaac Repentance. You're only gonna hear like 5 seconds of this theme every 15 hours. And the only way you can hear the entire track is if you search it up on YouTube, or you search for planetariums with the sole intention of listening to the soundtrack. So here are my criteria for the ratings. S tier. Basically all or almost all of the soundtracks are bangers. I am talking about the cream of the crop, best of the best. Unfortunately, only an elite few will make it up here. An A tier OST is mostly memorable, it complements the game pretty well, it stands out in a way that you'll make you search it up and add it to your playlist. And B tier is just all around good. Some good tracks, still make some memorable moments, nothing special though. A C tier is okay, I can probably recall some tracks, but overall doesn't really stand out. However, it is atmospheric. Now, just like Elden Ring, you can say what you want about the gameplay. I think it's fantastic, very good game. But if you ask me, the OST is pretty mid. It's atmospheric, but it doesn't stand out in a way that will make you add it to your playlist. And finally, D tier is the bottom tier, not memorable at all, or clearly not suited to be part of the game. It's like putting hip-hop music into Cuphead. Luckily, none of the OSTs I'm rating falls into this tier. And just to clarify, I don't have hundreds of hours in all of these games. I am not a sweaty hardcore gamer, so unfortunately I'll be limited to the ones I've played. First off, Dead Cells. I feel like I'm betraying my entire channel when I say this, but while the OST definitely stuck with me for a while, and there are some heavy hitters, some I just didn't really find that memorable. My favorite track has got to be the Astrolabe. Really feels like the end of your journey. Some tracks like the Ossuary are not bad per se, it's just atmospheric. It definitely has its highs and lows. And no, the reason I don't play Dead Cells soundtrack in my item showcase runs is not because I don't like the soundtrack, it's just because it's really hard to sync everything when I have to make cuts every 5 seconds. Nuclear Throne. So this is one of the roguelikes I picked up alongside Dead Cells in 2018. It feels really indie. It's the first twin-stick shooter I've played in a while. Despite it looking pretty simplistic, it's actually really hard. Now fortunately, if you ever have the chance to pick up this game, runs only take around 10 minutes, even if you win. So you generally get a taste of everything in terms of soundtrack. I recommend this as an entry to the roguelike genre, assuming that you don't rage quit first. Enter the Gungeon. Now this game has some style. Other than boasting a wide variety of guns, the comedy and references it has is unlike anything I've seen. My favorite track is actually unreleased as far as I know. It's the Lich boss soundtrack when you play as the Gunslinger, which is a minor spoiler now that I think about it. It runs only got 5 levels, so you're pretty much guaranteed to hear all the OST. Slay the Spire. I like the soundtracks because it gets you in the thinking mood. It is a card game after all, you can't really expect heavy metal in a game where you have to think carefully about what cards to play in what order. It's a very fun deck builder. The OST definitely sets the tone, gets you into the thinking mindset. Not that there's a lot of tracks to begin with. Hades. Now, this one is a banger. I mean, it's literally the same guys that made Bastion and Transistor. The Hub World soundtrack is great, and you'll definitely hear this one when you die over and over again. All the bosses and biome themes are great, even got some fantastic vocal tracks in there somewhere. In my opinion, it is on par with Hollow Knight soundtrack. Actually, I might even prefer it more than Hollow Knight. I'm pretty sure I just lost all credibility when I said that. Anyways, if you're looking for tunes to jam while dying repeatedly trying to escape hell, this is it. Also, at the 2020 Game Awards, Hades was nominated for 9 different categories but only won 2 of them. Most of them were taken away by The Last of Us Part 2. That's kinda sus. But Hades, you're still an S in my eyes. Crypt of the Necrodancer. What can I say? The composer for this game, Danny Baranowski, also composed the OG Binding of Isaac soundtrack. The literal point of the game is to follow the rhythm and move accordingly to the beat. Despite it looking very simplistic, it's actually really hard to get the hang of at first. Just like Nuclear Throne, it has that indie feel that really makes the soundtrack distinct. Unfortunately, I'm not good enough to pass through all the stages yet, but I have heard all of the possible tracks. Skul the Hero Slayer. So this is a new game that recently entered my library. It is made by a Korean company, so the soundtrack reminds me of something that could come from an MMO like Vindictus. Unfortunately, I'm not good enough to consistently reach the later stages of every run, but I have listened to the soundtrack quite a lot. Noita. This is also another new one that recently got added to my list. I can't really say all that much about this one, as I have the least amount of hours spent playing this game in all of the other ones on this list. I do like the destructive nature. You can really get creative with a lot of the terrain. It feels like a sandbox almost. The OST feels really haunting and carefully composed. As far as I know, multiple people were behind the making of the soundtrack. Overall feels very atmospheric, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. One Step from Eden. Okay, hear me out here guys. I don't know about anyone else, but I never had a fancy game console growing up. To this day, I have never played a Nintendo game. I got my first phone in 2014, and the game I played the most on that device was Geometry Dash. There was something very special about finding hidden gems of user-created music on Newgrounds.com and applying it to a music game, allowing it to appeal to a wider audience. That is the experience I get reminded of whenever I play One Step from Eden. The art style reminds me of Toho Project, since I'm pretty sure that's what partly inspired this game. The upbeat, 8-bit-esque OST really stuck out to me. Even if you don't plan on playing this game, the OST is definitely worth checking out alone. Risk of Rain 2. So here is a roguelike I've been playing for a while. I've never really been good at FPS games. No matter how many times I uninstall and reinstall Risk of Rain 2, I cannot for the life of me get good at this game. However, that does make the few times I did make it to the end of the game feel more special. My favorite track has got to be the commencement track, the one you hear when going to fight Mithra or whatever his name is. There's only been a very select few moments when I play indie games where I actually just sit down, pause everything and listen to the soundtrack, and when I got to the commencement stage, that was one of them. Though I probably should have paused the game since Risk of Rain 2 has a very unique timer mechanic, unlike anything I've seen in roguelikes. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's this game that inspired the new malaise mechanic in Dead Cells. Definitely check out this one if you're really good at looter shooters, and don't mind getting one-shotted. Last but not least, Binding of Isaac. Alright, so I have something to confess. Every time I play this game, I use a mod that replaces the Repentance soundtrack with Anti-Birth's soundtrack. However, this rating focuses on the Repentance soundtrack since it is the official version. This game, if you haven't seen my couple last videos, is what introduced me to roguelikes. So if we're talking about the OG Binding of Isaac, the OST has got to be S tier. There's something special about the original soundtrack in Flash Isaac by Danny Baranowski, whom I did mention earlier as the composer for Crypt of the Necrodancer. While Repentance has its good tracks like the theme for Dogma, and the Tainted characters were a surprise too, the OST definitely falls onto the more atmospheric side. As for Anti-Birth, I like the new perspective from a brand new composer. And I gotta say, it was really good for a fan-made mod for Rebirth. So this may come as a little controversial, but if I had to choose, S tier for OG Isaac, B tier for Repentance, and A tier for Anti-Birth. By the way, you thought we were done with controversial takes? I got one more for you guys. I actually play with the filter on. I actually can't stand the pixelated graphics. So there is my list for all of the OSTs from roguelikes I've played. Again, don't let this detract from the fact that my opinions of the soundtracks are completely separate from my opinions on the game itself. I really don't have a preference towards any type of games. One rule I have when it comes to games is that if it's good, I will play it. And these games that I have covered today are good. So play them. You will play them, right?